they're showing all this complicated math. Take 10% of this and go chase 12% of that, and all of these spreadsheets. It doesn't have to be that complicated. That's the magician saying, watch this hand while I pick your pocket with the other. And that's what the banking system, the payment matrix does. And I'm just here to help people see the truth so that they can get unplugged and take back control over their finances.
I'm really glad you said that. And I just heard a podcast from a mentor of mine, and he was saying something very similar that I think is what you're getting at, that you don't have to become a millionaire. You don't have to be
we already
wealthy.
are. That's the thing.
Okay.
Everybody is a millionaire in the making right now in this country. The average person is going to generate over $2 million in wealth over their working lifetime. So it's not, how do I become a millionaire? It's, how come you're not becoming a millionaire?
All right, guys. So we are back in the Financial Enabler podcast. We have a great guest today, Anthony Manganiello, best-selling personal finance author. Beyond excited to bring him in, and I'm just getting a phone call that I'm gonna have to cancel. That was not expecting that. And super excited to have him in here. And we're gonna talk about a lot about what you guys can benefit from finance. So Tony, thank you for being in the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. Thanks.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I kind of backed into personal finance. When it comes to what drives me, when I was a kid, my parents separated, and this is back in the 70s, back when, that wasn't real common. And it was it was difficult. And one of the things that was kind of like a life goal for me was to find out why that happened. And while there were a lot of different issues that were going on, one thing that really kind of helped add to the problem was personal financial stress. And one of the things that I've kind of committed myself to is, I know what that pain's like. I know how, when a family comes apart, personal financial stress does not help families. It's not like people are sitting around the kitchen table going, hey, honey, guess what? We got crazy schedules. The kids are driving us nuts. And you know what makes it all better? We're behind on our bills. Nobody ever says that. But when you are having those typical family stress points and financial stress is adding to that, it turns the volume up on everything else. And so over the last 30 years, my personal mission is to help families turn that volume down because they don't realize how the numbers are stacked against them. They've been misled by something I call the payment matrix, to be thinking that, hey, as long as you can make your payments, you can afford them. And I'm here to show people that that's not necessarily true. And the math backs it up. And it's math that they don't understand or never were actually shown. They're shown all this complicated math. Take 10% of this and go chase 12% of that, and all of these spreadsheets. It doesn't have to be that complicated. That's the magician saying, watch this hand while I pick your pocket with the other. And that's what the banking system, the payment matrix does. And I'm just here to help people see the truth so that they can get unplugged and take back control over their finances.
I'm really glad you said that. And I just heard a podcast from a mentor of mine, and he was saying something very similar that I think is what you're getting at, that you don't have to become a millionaire. You don't have to be
we already
wealthy.
are. That's the thing. Everybody is a millionaire in the making right now in this country. The average person is going to generate over $2 million in wealth over their working lifetime. So it's not, how do I become a millionaire? It's, how come you're not becoming a millionaire? And the payment matrix is designed to suck them dry, keeping them paying using tomorrow's money today, and I can afford my payments mentality. And that's why people are winding up broke. They don't think they're a millionaire. That's the biggest identity theft in the country.
Wow. Dude, Tony, how come are you not? Wow, dude, I love that. That impresses me so much. Thank you for that. And I think that it clearly is it's very funny how mindset is verbiage, right? But like that's the guy that I was talking about, it's the same idea. And I like this, how you frame, how come you're not? What he was getting at is that we do not have to have massive amounts of wealth, but if you're worrying about money at the dinner table, if you're worrying if you are not prepared for when you're 60 and 70 to be able to handle the financial burden, that's what we're trying to mitigate. Like And I
Oh yeah.
always go when I talk to people, I'm not talking about Ferraris. Not at
No.
all. I am talking you having the best bed in a hospital room. I'm talking eating the best food and being able to afford, when your kid says, Dad, I want a baseball bat. You can be like, buddy, I'm gonna get you the best baseball bat.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about here, not Ferraris. But I like this, that we miss the idea that we are going to generate the $2 million in wealth. You're saying the average American will generate $2 million.
Yeah. And in the research I've done for the book I just published in September, um, as a website called Zippia.com says that the average, there's different industries, different business sectors, different job types, but across the board, today the average working individual is going to generate $2.7 million in personal wealth, personal income. And so it's not a matter of how do I become a millionaire? It's the fact that in the chapter 2 of my book, it's called Who Do You Think You Are? The problem people have is they think of themselves financially through the budgeting lens. They got their budget, they put their money, what's coming in at the top, excuse me, got all my payments in the middle, and man, God, help me have something left over at the end.
Mm.
And if they have something left over at the end, they're thinking, I'm all right. They have a false sense of security because what they don't know, the numbers I'm trying to get people to understand is that the interest rates you're charged on all of your debt, you can have a 4% mortgage, a 10% credit card, an 8% car loan. When you actually break down the percentages that you're being charged versus the volume of interest dollars you pay every month, they couldn't be further apart. The average family is paying up to 50% or more in some cases of their total payments is being lost to interest. So then most people, when they think of income and through the budgeting lens, they're forgetting to think about, let's see, my sample family in the book, they've got about $31,000 a year in debt payments between a house, couple cars, a few credit cards. Nobody ever stops to ask and say to themselves, hey, how much do I have to gross to bring home that 31 grand a year?
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually around 47 to 50% of your gross income is spent on debt payments before you ever made them. That's why the whole fallacy of being able to make payments means you can afford them is true. Because who can afford to pay 50% interest every month and waste a half of their gross income every year to make payments they think they're paying 8, 12, 15% on?
That's absurd. And I'm with you. And I like how you are way more in the math than I am. That's a detail that I have not made it a strength yet. And it's interesting because whenever I deal with people with debt, they're like, oh, I have $40,000 in debt, so much. And I'm like, let me ask you a question. If you had $40,000 of house debt, would it feel like a lot? He's like, no. So you don't have a lot of debt. You have a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And you're getting crushed by that interest. And it's an incredible game that, like you're pointing out, we're missing out of how much, and I get what you're saying. Let me understand if what you're saying is, if I look at my mortgage statement, if I remove insurance cost, if my my interest is more than my premium, I'm paying 50% of my pay into interest. That's what you're getting at?
Yeah. And in a mortgage, even a 3% mortgage in the first 7 years, 48% of those 84 payments is interest. Wow. Even on a 3% mortgage. Because people, they're never, if you've ever signed for a mortgage, going to the title company, wherever you're doing it, when you're like, can't wait to get the keys, right? Because all you're sitting there is thinking about, putting that, loading your furniture, decorating the new home. And they go over the mortgage documentation. There's a piece of paper called the TILA, Truth in Lending Act document, where they tell you basically, hey, you've got this $300,000 mortgage. By the time you're done making all these payments, you will pay $750,000 or whatever it is. And mortgage brokers will kind of just like, oh, this is where the government makes you feel bad. Just sign this and move on, because they don't want people to see it. And that's where, people think, mortgage debt or a home is good debt. I got news for you. I can prove to you with math, real estate is not good debt.
Ooh.
And if real estate's not good debt, what's the rest of it at?
Yeah. If it's not zero, it's not good.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times people don't get that when you pay the minimum payment, you're paying the maximum interest.
Ooh, min payment max interest. I love that. It's very interesting. I literally, I just posted a reel try highlighting the value of renting your properties. And again, I am not anti buy-in.
Mm-hmm.
I am big on pro understanding of the effect of buy-in.
Right.
And like you probably highlight, right? I own a home, it's great, but so much interest. And we're not
Well, you
even going
don't
to
own a
talk
home until you don't have a mortgage.
right.
Because
And then
if you think you own your home, stop making your payments. The owner of the home will come knocking.
that's true, right? And there's so much flexibility with rent. I mean, I'll go back to it. I'm not saying that everybody needs to rent. There's advantages to home ownership. But be real about the effects of owning and be real about the effects of renting and what it could do for your life. Like, I know plenty of people renting that have an incredibly high net worth because they're not carrying all these other burdens. And which now you're highlighting the burdens: minimum payment, max interest. I'll share with you a little game that I did when I owned a house in California, and I had 4 roommates, classic military, VA loan, just bunch of dudes. And my game was, how much faster could I get close to passing my premium payment into interest?
Yeah.
And the day I crossed it, and I remember it was by $3. I was like, I did it. We're good. Now this thing's going to snowball. But it was just $3 a month that I was seeing the change. And like whenever I put extra, and it's crazy the amount of money that we're paying in interest, especially in the first what was you said 7 years, 8 years?
7 years. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, actually, in a mortgage, typically, you don't get to that paying off half of the principal, and depending on the interest rate, until about year 2021. The first 2 decades of a typical mortgage, most of your payment is going to be interest.
Right.
And
That's
see,
absurd.
and that's the thing about, people are thinking themselves through this budgeting lens, and you got to throw that away.
Yeah.
You got to think in terms of cash flow. You have cash flowing through your life easily every week, month, and year. The question is, where is it flowing? And then no one stops to think about how the numbers work and what those numbers do to that cash flow. It basically makes you just a go-between. You're just a conduit for all this cash to flow through to make everybody else rich. And what I'm talking about, like even for people who are renting, when you think about how much you're paying in rent, if you think about cash flow in terms of, okay, I've got this much coming in. So here's the problem with the budget. People are thinking, oh, I'm able to make my payments. I got something left over. I've arrived. That's only half the battle. Because when people have that mentality, what they're doing is they're saying, I'm going to put the purpose of my income, that purpose is to make payments.
Yeah.
And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
People need to realize the purpose of the income from your work or your career needs to be to replace the income from your work or your career. Because as you grow older, retirement's like a cliff, and we're all heading towards it.
Right.
The closer we get without preparation, the harder it is to stop and avoid going over. And so when people are thinking in terms of just making payments and thinking they can afford them because they can actually make the payments, that's what the payment matrix wants you to think. Because that, I call the $2.7 million, it's lifetime value. You're worth millions of dollars in the eyes of the people of the payment matrix.
Yeah.
They want you thinking about your budget, and they want you thinking about your personal finances through that budget. Because as long as they can keep distracting you, they keep collecting tons of interest for decades. And you reach retirement age, and you're sitting there going, like 92% of the people in this country, according to the National Institute on Retirement Security, 92% of the people in this country will never be able to quit working comfortably. If they want to maintain the standard of living they've had while they were working, in retirement, they're going to have to continue working. Because that $2.7 million was drained away by the payment matrix. Yeah, Uncle Sam gets paid first.
Right.
We're never going to be able to avoid that. We got to pay for for help the country. I'm not one of these, we should never pay taxes. I just want to make sure the taxes we pay are being used right.
Yeah.
But, you got to support the country, the greatest country in the history of the world.
Right.
But after that, the highway thievery that's taking place amongst lending institutions, credit card companies, mortgage companies, they never teach people that, hey, look, Jaime, here's the deal. I'm going to put you in a situation where every dollar you spend every month on your payments, I'm going to keep 50 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And then half of the income you generate every year is going to be what is required for you to bring home those payments every year. So you're going to live on half of your income for everything else in your life, taxes and living expenses. And it's going to cost half or 50% interest every month.
Wow.
If you knew that, you'd be like, this guy needs to be arrested.
Yeah.
But they're getting away with it all day long, every day.
And let me ask you just for a quick question with this, because you're highlighting something that I think that we don't really get. When mortgage lenders reach out to us trying to restart, to refi, is that just clearly because you highlighted, and I have heard about this, that those 7 years are key and it takes 21 years to go positive. So what you're saying that even though it may be a good, we perceive it to be a good deal, it is not always or rarely is a good deal to refi or to do an on any of those other lending vehicles for real estate.
I'll tell you what, you need to think of it differently.
Okay.
Rent, mortgage payments, whatever, it's a required expense because you have to have a home.
Yeah.
So the question is, how can I minimize that expense as much as possible?
Mm.
When it comes to those first 7 years, just think if in that 7-year period of time, you could pay off your mortgage and every other penny of debt you owe, how would that make your life different? And that's about how long it takes for us to show people how to become debt free. Because, and people will ask me, how is it possible to become debt free in so short a time? And so there's simple math. And this is complicated math to simple math. Think about how much you owe on your home, your cars, your credit cards. Come up with a total. Maybe it's the sample family in my house, in my book, $251,000. Multiply that by 2. You have $500,000. They bring home $80,000 a year. Bring home. You divide 500,000 by 80,000. What does that give you?
It's like a 4. No, it's more.
That's it's like 6.5.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm
what
not
does
good
that
at,
mean?
I'm not good at brain math. You just caught me. I was like, oh boy.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
But
it's okay.
you're basically looking at 6.5 years. What does that mean? In 6.5 years, you'll bring home twice what you owe. Bring home pay. So the question isn't, how can I get out of debt? The question is, why can't you? And that's what the payment matrix wants you to be oblivious to. Because as long as you just keep living your life through a budgeting lens and you keep saying to yourself, oh, I got my payments made, I got a few $100 left over, I'm good. That is the route where you're going to wind up at being 65, 70 years old, as you were saying. And you're not going to be able to retire, or you're going to have some kind of job or live with the kids or something. When you've been a millionaire in the making all along, that identity's been stolen. And you've been misled to believe millionaires are people with, like, as you said before, Ferraris, diamond rings, yachts. No, a millionaire just means your net worth is $1 million.
Yeah. And I go ahead, keep going. Sorry.
No, so, and the math is there for you to work it.
Yeah.
If you work it the way opposite that we're being led to believe by the matrix that's sucking us dry financially.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a few times the payment matrix. For the audience, can you explain and maybe you have already explained it, what is the payment matrix?
The payment matrix is a system set up by the banking industry. And you have your weekly, monthly, whatever, however often you get paid, your payments, your income goes into your checking account. And from there, you make your payments to wherever you owe money to. That's the payment matrix, because you're only able to use each dollar one time. And so the trick is, how can you get more out of your dollar, not by generating some kind of crazy interest rate, but how can you get your dollar to do more than one thing at a time? And there are ways to do that the matrix doesn't, the payment matrix doesn't want you to know about, because once we unplug somebody from the matrix, like in the movie,
Yeah.
they're free. The only difference is in the movie, when you got unplugged, you're like, this place is kind of like a dungeon.
Yeah, yeah.
This is a little bit better when you get unplugged.
And let me ask you, is that what you refer to as dual duty dollars?
Yes.
Can you explain the
Yes.
dual duty dollars and how can we apply it?
Okay, so you're not going to be able to do that in the banking system because
Mhm.
it's not designed that way. There are only a couple ways that I'm aware of. One that I've recently learned about over the last few months that I'm exploring more and more to help people, because again, it's all about helping families and just the people. When you see people getting taken advantage of, you want to help them, and that's what's happening. So you have two different types of accounts that you can use, and if you can combine both of them, it's really powerful.
Okay.
When it comes to the system that my book is about, it's it's kind of like a shock when people hear about the platform that we work with is a whole life insurance product.
Mm-hmm.
Because back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was one of those buy term invest the rest guys.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first found out about this banking system inside of the banking contract, or I should say whole life contract, I was like, no way. Because I mean, like, people tell me whole life insurance for years. I'd be like, alarms are going off, grab the torches and pitchforks, storm the castle.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it's all about how you pay your premium dollars. Most people aren't taught that they're buying insurance wrong
Mm.
all of the time. What do you think about when you buy life insurance?
I understand it very well, but I'll tell you what most people say. I'm just buying something that my kids are going to get or my wife is going to get when I die.
Yeah. How much will my loved ones get when I die?
Yeah.
And they're basically saying, I got to protect my family against loss of income.
Right.
Here's a clue. You're not the only one in that equation looking to protect themselves against loss of income.
Mm-hmm.
Who else do you think is protecting themselves against loss of income?
The insurance company.
The insurance company.
Yeah.
That's why you don't just sign up for life insurance and they just give it to you.
Yeah.
You got to go through underwriting. You're getting blood drawn. You're getting a sample of this and that and the other thing. And they go through underwriting. And the whole process of underwriting is to prove to the insurance company science and statistics that you're not going anywhere for a good long while, at least with regard to natural causes.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is flip the script. We say death benefit is important. We're not throwing that off to the side, but you're only going to need your death benefit once.
Right.
Most people aren't going to need it until they're in their late 70s, early 80s, or beyond. The way we're going to design your product, your policy, is that you'll have it there even though you're not making premium payments at that point.
Mm-hmm.
What we're doing up front is revolutionizing how you pay your premium dollars. And instead of buying death benefit, which is what the life insurance company wants you to do, we're going to buy cash value.
Mm.
Because cash value in life insurance contracts have this really cool little feature where you could use the money from the policy
Mm-hmm.
while it's still working for tomorrow. So when you're faced with your budget, the biggest challenge people have is what I call Sophie's choice for your dollar. I'm a little older, so Sophie's Choice, the movie, is something that I'm familiar with. And for those that aren't, Meryl Streep is in World War II, and she's in Germany, and they're like, you got two kids, we're going to let you take one with you, and the other one's got to go on their own. And it's like, oh, that's what you look at every dollar, and you're like, oh, do I use you for today, or do I use you for tomorrow? And that's where people have the biggest struggle, because the need is today, and we kick the can continually for tomorrow. When you're able to use a contract like the one I'm talking about, you can use the money. Primarily, what our focus is to become debt free. My family in my book, the sample family, gets debt free in 9 years and 3 months. They paid off $250,000, and once they're debt free, the policy that they've been building and using to pay off their debt has over $67,000 in cash value.
Wow.
So it's the ability to pay off your debt and build tax-free wealth with the same dollars at the same time.
Got it.
And that's really the paradigm shift. Is the banking matrix wants you to pay all your bills through a banking account, a checking account, and that you will need one for that. And there's things you have to use, but minimize that.
Right.
Don't let that be your only cash flow tool.
Yeah.
You need to have cash flow tools that redirect your cash flow back to you. in
Yeah.
any way possible, because that $2.7 million doesn't accumulate itself.
Right.
You have to have it flowing back to you. And if you're plugged into the payment matrix and your money's going through a checking account to pay your bills every month, and you think you can take that 10% or whatever they tell you to pay yourself first with, the quote marks,
Yeah.
you're actually paying yourself last, because nobody says, oh, I'm paying myself first because Uncle Sam comes first,
Yeah.
the groceries come first, the bill payments come first.
Yeah.
You're paying yourself last. But what we do is, instead of taking that money, that several $100s or whatever it might be a month, let's use that cash flow, that number at the bottom of your budget, to work at replacing the number at the top of the budget.
Right.
And that's where you begin to make some progress.
Mm. I love that, and I'm familiar with insurance products, and I have a horror story with a whole life policy. Um, it's actually the unusual one. I had one, I loved it, and I started looking at different products, and I called that agent, and I was like, "Hey, I'm looking at these other type of products," and he bashed it so bad that I canceled with him because he wasn't honest to me about the two different types. Fast forward, I keep getting, I've been denied multiple times. So I
Yeah.
wish I had both types of policy. And that's, I'm an advocate of understanding how to use these things for the proper purpose, and it's like everything, right? There's good and bad actors. And I like that. I'm definitely going to explore this more, because I think it's, like you said, it's, there's something to be said about the insurance products and how they exist in the world, in the American economy. And the buy, the best analogy that I got of what you said of buy term and invest the rest was a friend of mine. She's 60 years old, and she was a buy term, invest the rest. And she's like, I did it. I'm 60. I bought term and I didn't invest the rest, so I have nothing. Yeah. And I was like,
they buy term and they spend the rest.
Spend the rest,
That's
right? If they did, there would be, if they invested the rest, sure, like it would probably be a bulletproof system, but most people don't. And I'm sure you've, I like throwing this analogy. Have you read or heard of the book Random Walk Down Wall Street?
That one I haven't heard of.
It's the guy used to be in Prudential, then went to different companies. And at one point, there's like a small sentence of a huge value of insurance, is that it's a forced savings plan.
Right.
Because once you get it, you're now able to, you have to do it. And while we may not value it, like, again, most people don't value it, but once you do, the moment that you need it, or you use it right, how you just said, which is way more important, game changer. So you're saying the whole life product is how we, one of the ways that we unplug for the matrix, or is or is it the only way?
Well, there's another way, where when you take a different approach with a line of credit, where it's all about how is the math set up, and understanding that if I pay X number of dollars every month, and these are the minimum payments, but I have this extra cash left over every month, and I'm going to go chase double-digit rates of return that are a fallacy with, buy term and invest the rest or whatever. A lot of gurus talk about that. Whether or not they do it themselves, I don't know. But what we're saying is, what would the insurance company do with that money? They wouldn't buy death benefit.
No.
What would the bank do with your money? They wouldn't pay bills. No. They'd be paying down, they'd be looking to take what is most commonly grossly managed or grossly efficient management of cash flow, and optimizing the use of the cash flow, which is basically when you put $1 towards equity, or you put $1 into your cash value, that's recyclable cash.
Right.
So you can, like, for instance, in my book, you can borrow, as an example, from a properly structured contract.
Right.
Say you want to buy a car. There's basically two ways people buy cars. One is go through the interrogation at the finance office after you've done picking. You spent hours driving. You've done all this stuff. You've got, like, health units are low. You're basically like needing a triage center.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go into the financing thing, and then then they really, they throw all these rates of return, and by the time you're done, you're just like, give me the keys.
Yeah,
right?
whatever.
So you borrow the money from the finance department, and you wind up with a payment. or you can save up money and buy it cash. And people say that's better, the better of the two. And maybe it is. But here's a third option. What if you took the money out and you borrowed against yourself? What if you funded the loan yourself and you paid yourself back? The way that works is you have the car paid off in 5 years, just like you would with the 5-year payment plan either way. I mean, if you buy a car for cash, you got to keep replenishing the next car purchase, right? So you're going to have somewhat of a payment because eventually that car is going to need to be replaced, and you're not going to have enough to buy a brand new car then, or even a good used car. Well, what if you were able to finance that purchase yourself? And the way the numbers play out, you have your car paid off in 5 years, you own the car, and the money that was used to finance the car has made you a $2,600 net profit, tax-free.
Wow.
So not only do you own the car, but you've got $2,600 more you wouldn't have had if you paid cash, or the $2,600 would have been paid to the car finance company.
Yeah. That's and I love this system, and I'm glad you're highlighting it, and not enough people use it right. Just curious, because I've heard people mention it. You just mentioned line of credit.
Mhm.
Are you a proponent of using a HELOC for this, or
It's
is that one
possible.
of the ways?
It is one of the ways. It's very important to understand we're not doing a HELOC to remodel the kitchen, to buy a summer home. We're not buying a RV. We're using the HELOC to maximize our cash flow so that we're eliminating debt every day, every week, every month.
Right.
And when you have that strategy strapped onto this private family banking strategy, like we're talking about, now you're building assets yourself. The cash is flowing back to you, and you're still living the same life you normally would. People are going to wind up, like the example in my book, the family, if they took the $600 a month they have that they apply to their future, and if they got 7% return over the next 30 years, 35 years old, they'd have about $750,000. And the whole percent return thing is a little bit of a question mark because we know the market is the market. I like to call it the shock market. How many times do people look at their portfolio and be, oh my God, So if they use that methodology, they enter into retirement most likely with debt payments. Here's the thing about debt payments. I mentioned before that you have to gross about 50% of your income to bring home enough to make your debt payments. It's all proportional. What happens if you don't have debt payments in retirement? What happens if you don't have debt payments before retirement? That means you can live on half your income, maintain the standard of living you had before, and the burden of replacing 100% of your income has been slashed in half.
Wow.
And so the family in my book, they use the system I'm talking about, and they're debt-free in 9 years and 3 months. And instead of continuing to make debt payments, they double down and they start building more wealth for themselves in this banking environment. They have $1.4 million in cash by the time they're 65, and it's tax-free. And they're able to take about 80 grand a year out of that for 25 years, tax-free.
That's and wow, that's so much money. I want the service members and veterans to catch this, because as service members, we have a unique tool. There's these between veteran disability and converting our pension to tax-free. There's a way to do that. Like one of my friends, he's getting $80,000 tax-free.
Awesome.
And I'm like, that is what, 200 grand taxable in the taxable equivalent. And it's like,
Pretty
you're
close.
making a ton of money. And it's totally different when you shift the numbers from tax-free, and until you've seen the math multiple times, it's the effect is so huge. Like I love what you just said. It is that you can live on 50% of your income if you had no debt and it was tax-free. piece of
and
cake.
and you're you're living the same lifestyle you did
Same
while you
lifestyle.
were working.
Wow.
That's the thing.
That's
Don't you think you deserve to? The average family will save about $120,000 in interest when they get through with our plan. And my question to them, and I always put it this way, I'm like, I know this is a silly question, but I have to ask it. Would you
yeah.
like that 120 grand in your pocket?
hmm
Or if not, we can continue to let it go into your banker's pockets.
Yeah. And I don't want that.
Yeah.
I don't want that. I
And how
love
much you got
this.
to bring home to make that 120 grand? It's a
Yeah.
lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And now going to this, because I like the methodology and um what would you say, and let's start with this. What is your experience with service members and veterans? Have you worked with any?
Hmm.
Do you have any? And maybe I'm asking to stereotype it almost. What are the major issues that you're seeing within that demographic?
When it comes to service members, which, as I mentioned before, I have nothing but the greatest ever. I'm a big fan. I've got all the
Appreciate it.
Valhalla shirts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I got
yeah.
like a dozen of them.
Good.
But the biggest challenge is if you're in active duty and you're being deployed into dangerous areas, life insurance is going to be difficult at best to get. But
hmm
that doesn't mean you can't employ the other strategy.
Right.
But when you're able to channel some funds to a life insurance process that is revolutionizing how you're paying your premium dollars, because that's where we really focus. We focus on life insurance as a tax haven.
Yeah.
Back in the 80s, some laws were passed because rich guys were they go to their advisors and they say, hey, I got an extra 50 grand a year. Where can I put it to save taxes on it? Their
hmm
advisor would be like, yeah, well, we could put it into a life insurance contract. Rich
hmm
guy'd be like, what the heck do I need life insurance for? I'm rich. And the advisor say, well, don't worry, we'll just open the smallest policy possible. We'll stuff all the rest in the cash value.
Yeah.
And that's because it was tax free. But in the 80s, the IRS, the government, they found out that this was happening. And they had to impose rules on life insurance contracts so that
hmm
you have to be qualified. They have to be what's called compliant with IRS 7 payroll
Yeah.
so that it remains tax free. So, what we do is we say, given the individual's age and other factors and how much their premium dollars that they can afford,
Yeah.
how much cash value can I buy, the maximum, with
Right.
these premium dollars, and put only the death benefit the IRS requires on top of that
hmm
so that the cash value is tax free. I like to
Right.
call it going from tax me now to tax me never.
Tax me
And so
never.
that's what we do it. That's how we do it. People will ask, well, what will my death benefit be if I do this? And I never know until I go into the software because I'm not trying to buy death benefit.
hmm
I'm putting a minimum death. I'm saying, let's bet with the insurance company. If they offer you a contract, then that means they're convinced you're going to be around for a while and you won't need this death benefit for years and years to come.
Yeah.
So let's focus on cash value in the early years, so much so that we front load it with so much cash value that when you're in your 60s or 70s, you can actually turn the premium off if you want
Yeah.
and still have a self sustaining contract that you
hmm
can take cash from to live on and still have a death benefit, even though you're not paying a premium.
Yeah.
When the life insurance is the most expensive for people in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
We're flipping the script. We're saying, how would the insurance companies spend your dollar if it was for them? And how would the banks spend your dollar if it was for them? And we're saying, let's take a page out of their playbook,
Yeah.
apply that to your finances, and see
Yes.
what the numbers say.
Isn't there this I've seen the numbers, bank owned life insurance, and the numbers
Oh gosh,
are
yeah.
astronomical,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I always ask people is that if that big bank that is connected with America, with our nation, um, if you look at their financial statements, why does a bank have more life insurance than real estate? Like there has to be something there. It's
Yeah.
not the only tool, but there's something there that they have chosen it to have more of that than they do real estate, which is very
And the
interesting.
thing about that, Jaime, is that insurance companies are really good at being conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you have the right kind of company to work with and the right kind of contract to work with, I believe it's chapter 7 in the book, my book. I actually walk through all of those, what you need.
Yeah.
You are putting yourself as a partner with the insurance company, not a client. not just a client.
Partner.
You're partnering with them because you have a mutual insurance company doesn't sell stock. You only can become a shareholder by buying a policy. And you work
Yeah.
with a mutual insurance company that offers a participating contract. That
Yeah.
participating contract means when they're profitable, they
Mhm.
share their profits via a dividend to their shareholders, which are the policyholders. So you're partnering with them. And because we're focused on buying cash value, we're accumulating cash value from day one.
Mhm.
Back in my day, when I first learned about insurance in the late 80s, early 90s, it was like cash value for a whole life insurance policy wasn't there until like a year or two later. That's
Yeah.
because people were buying death benefit. So
Right.
we're saying, hey, the insurance company offers you a contract. You're probably not going to need a death benefit for at least a few decades.
Right.
So what are you going to need between now and then? That's why I say the question isn't how much will my loved ones get when I die. The question you have to ask yourself is, what will this contract do for me while I'm alive?
Right.
Because there's going to be a lot of living between the first premium payment and the death benefit getting paid out
Right.
if you get
That's
offered a contract.
a whole lot of living, and we got to maximize that. And
Yes.
I love this, and I'm definitely going to be asking you a bunch of other questions about this. I wanted to, if you don't mind, I know
No,
you're
sure.
a big man of faith. Do you mind if we go down that path for a second?
Not at all. That's my favorite topic.
Perfect. So I was a huge Christian before I joined the military, left the path for about 20 years, and it wasn't better. What would you say? What does the Bible teach us about wealth creation? And how do you see that?
This is funny because a lot of people think that God doesn't want us to be prosperous. When
Mm-hmm.
Nehemiah 2:20 says, "Our God of heaven will prosper you."
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of scripture about prospering. But here's the thing: Paul says people will misquote him oftentimes, say that money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to how God views money, think of the parable of the talents.
Right.
Okay, he gives 5 talents to one, or 10 talents to one, five to another, and gives one to the third guy.
Mm-hmm.
Comes back, the guy with 10 says, "Look, I've done all this great stuff, and I have 20 talents.
Mm-hmm.
Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the court of your Lord." Right?
Right.
The guy with 5 talents, he went out and got 5 more.
Mm-hmm.
Same response. The guy with 1 talent says, "I was afraid, and I went and buried your talent. Here's your talent back to you.
Mm-hmm.
You wicked, lazy servant."
Mm.
Here's the thing: God's going to prosper us as long as we are serving Him. He gives us all talents, whatever they may be. He gives us a passion. A lot of people will quote Ephesians 2:8 and 9, which is this: we're saved by grace, not by faith, so that no man can boast. But you know what 2:10 says? That we are His craftsmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works that He's prepared in advance for us to walk in them.
Mm.
He's given us talents to walk in a good work that's been prepared for each one of us before the foundation of time. So as a believer, I just go to God every morning and I'm like, show me what steps to take in this walk you've given me to walk.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
as far as whatever prosperity you give me, great. Whatever prosperity you decide to hold back from me, that's great. Because I don't care about that as much as I care about pleasing you. I want to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's my only goal in life. Now, I've got a family with a lot of kids. My first ministry is to my wife and to my children. And obviously, God is before that because I can't do it without Him.
Mm-hmm.
And then, whatever this work is that I'm doing, I'm trusting that this is the work, the walk He's prepared in advance for me to walk in. And however He decides to prosper me or not, that's not the point.
Yeah.
The point is being a good and faithful servant.
I I could agree more. I'm diving into the disciplines of becoming a man of faith, and whether prosperity, abundance, it takes many different shapes. And I'm particularly much like you. I don't believe that God wants us to live out of it, but abundance may come in very, very many ways, and especially in the eternal life that we have to account, right? Like, if let's just use financial aspect. If God chooses to bless me with $1 billion, great. He may also choose to bless me with only 100,000, but I have all this other abundance then on after, right?
Yeah.
Is there's so much to it. And what do you think it is about Christians, Catholics that that keeps them from believing that God wants them to live in abundance, whatever that may be, and why they are so connected, unfortunately connected to lack, financial lack?
Well, I have to say, my answer might surprise you.
Okay.
You know how people are always saying, I need my me time, right?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
need any me time. I need he time. I need to be with him every morning. I need to be, I'm not, I mean, I spend time in the morning with God. It's the first thing I do every weekday morning. I sleep in on the weekends because I'm up so early during the week.
Yeah.
But the biggest challenge people have is they're not connecting with the Spirit.
Mm.
They're feeding themselves. I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine last year, and he was saying when he goes to mass, you know, the homilies aren't really getting to him. And I looked at him and I said, "Do you eat once a week,
Yeah.
dude? If you're not feeding yourself every day, you think that 20-minute that man who was, you know, don't get me wrong, I have great respect for all the service people, all the non-laity people, the priests and the pastors,
Mm-hmm.
but when in chapter 1 or chapter 3, 2 or 3 of Genesis,
Mm-hmm.
who did Satan go after? He went after
To
Eve.
Eve. Yeah.
Was Eve around when God told Adam not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
No.
She hadn't been created yet.
Yeah.
So what did Eve say? And now I can't prove this, but I have like a little own theory on this. What did Eve say when the serpent said, "Surely you will not die"? And she said to him, "I can't eat it. I can't even touch it. God never said you can't touch it." I believe that they could have juggled with the fruit. They just weren't supposed to eat it. But he was able to convince her that because she heard through Adam what God said.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't hear from God herself.
Oh, wow.
So when we're sitting there like, you know, I'm going to listen to this pastor talk, I'm going to listen to all, that's all good. But if you're not sitting there directly in connection with the Spirit yourself,
Mm-hmm.
you can wind up being Eve.
Yeah. And
It's the telephone game.
yeah, and I find that unfortunately we're so distant from our connection with God and spirituality. And again, the only reason I'm saying spirituality is that there's incredible men of faith from Buddhists, Hindus, and even Muslim religions that I have not found what's in me to try to convert them. And I don't
That's
think
not your job.
it's not my job, right? And
Yeah.
I don't, and like you said, I love that what you just said, right? Our job is to evangelize, not to convert.
Well, my favorite saying is evangelize at all times and when necessary, use words.
Yeah. That's good. And there's men of incredible faith in all walks that how do we say these things and don't live it? And it's like we pick and choose the literature, right? It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
God, money is the root of all evil. It's like, no. This.
Yeah.
Or God doesn't want me to do this, but like, no, it says there. And so do you believe that the Bible and God wants us to live or have financial abundance?
Well, when Jesus says, I've come to give life and that more abundantly, the word for life in the Greek that is used there is Zoe. That is life here. The thing is, what do you define as abundance?
Yeah.
And when you're connecting, there's two spirits we can follow. There's a spirit of this world, led by the God of this world, who, pro tip, he ain't the God we want to follow.
Wow.
I mean, Jesus said, what did Jesus say when he was before Pontius Pilate? He said, my kingdom's not of this world,
Mm-hmm.
but this is the world we're in. Because when Adam bit the apple, or pomegranate, whatever fruit it was, when he bit that fruit, he gave title deed to the earth to Satan.
Mm-hmm.
So we're living behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
And when Revelation talks about who is worthy to open the scroll is the title deed to earth. And the only one worthy is the Lamb. He comes back and reclaims that. So that context to understand you as in the military, if you're behind enemy lines, you're not living carefree. You're just like Peter said, be on guard.
Mm-hmm.
The enemy of your soul prowls around like a lion seeking who he can devour.
Right.
That's how we're supposed to live. At the same time, we have to realize who is it that lives in us. Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world, and
Mm.
greater is he who is in me than he who is in the world. But when you don't connect with the Spirit to have that juice regularly, if you're just going mass on or church on the weekend and you're not in the Bible every day, you're not praying you're not. I don't even listen to anything but Christian music all the time.
Yeah.
My whole my life is, I just want him to take glory in anything I can give him, because I know there's nothing I could ever do to repay the grace and mercy I've been given.
For sure.
And it's just, you can't do enough of that. But people will chase after the me time and I got to do this. I got to
I gotta
all I need to
relax.
do. Yeah, I need to just go be with my Lord. I
Yeah.
wake up in the morning and I'm like, good morning, Papa. What are we doing today?
Yeah. And it's funny. I'm going off that. I always say it's funny. I'm trying to remove that phrase. I
That's all
like
right.
your analogy of being behind enemy lines, because I've never been behind enemy lines, right? I've been in conflict, but not behind enemy lines, not in that feature, in that level. But I like to think that if somebody was in that situation, the more connected you were back with the good side, the better it
Mm-hmm.
is. So if you're going to be there, you just got to communicate, spend your time with him. And
Yeah.
that's big, right? And we have to go into those analogies that like the perspective that how much closer we are. And I appreciate you that communicating with this with my social media platform. Unfortunately, some people are always trying to defend the lack mentality with biblical scripture, and I'm like, buddy, that is like saying that God doesn't want good for you. It's like I cannot twist your arm, but
Who said, and I think these words are in red. If you
yeah,
who are imperfect would give your child something good, how much more will your Father in heaven, who is
mm,
perfect, give you? But what he's doing, most likely, in most instances, is protecting you from the trappings of wealth,
mm,
meaning your spirit. How many people do we see achieve a lot of success financially only to have that success? They weren't spiritually prepared for it.
yeah,
So if God's not blessing you, I tell people all the time, never ask God to use you. Always ask God to make me useful.
mm,
And in the military, if you can't perform the most basic stuff, they're not going to throw you out in a conflict.
no,
And if you're not communicating with him on a regular basis, how can he trust you to go and do the right thing?
yeah, and yeah, you said that it's like we can't. God challenges us, and it's give us ways to teach us and give us a path. And if we're not ready, why would we get blessed with $1 million? And the more we are blessed with 2.7 million, right? I'm gonna go back to that.
Yeah.
We are blessed with 2.7 million, but to keep it and build on that worth, it really shows that. And I've heard it, and I'm sure you've dealt with it yourself. The more financial abundance you have, there's more responsibility that comes
Yeah.
with it. Easier to get corrupted. And for me, I'm very blessed. The people that I admire, and I'm talking like 8-figure guys, 9-figure guys, they put their faith and their spirituality at the forefront because they know at any moment is like
Yeah.
gone. Like nobody is. What is it? I just listened to something that like, yeah. Either way, irrelevant. The point is that the closer we are to it, the closer we are to God, the more we can do.
Yeah.
And the more we'll get and earn, not earn because we are already forgiven, but we can live closer to the promises and the gifts that He's given us. I just heard this in church this weekend. Is like the promises are there for the taking.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of my favorite scriptures is Genesis, I think it's 14:15. We know the story, right? Moses leads everybody out of Israel. They're trapped between Pharaoh and the Red Sea.
Yeah.
And Moses gives this great speech. The Egyptians you see before you will never be blah, 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 blah. What's God's response to Moses' speech?
That do it. I don't know because I haven't gotten there.
He says, why are you crying out to me?
Yeah.
Basically, what the takeaway on that is, dude, you just had 10 miracles performed. I've just worked through you. Why are you not just raise your staffs, part the sea, and walk through on dry ground? Haven't I already proved this to you?
Get to it.
When was the last time God showed up on earth? Is Jesus.
Yeah.
Is Jesus in his man suit?
Yeah.
God has limited himself. I'm a firm believer in God has limited himself to working through mankind. Because if he shows up in his glory, we're all ash. So we have to realize that to him much is given, much is required. That's the whole thing about the parable of the talents. We're given, the Bible says, I think it's in Philippians, Paul says, he doesn't say, we've been given a few heavenly blessings, or we've been given a couple dozen. We've been given every heavenly blessing.
All of them.
There's nothing we lack. What we lack is wisdom, knowledge, and understanding in the position we hold as authority, as children of God on this world, the world of the enemy, until he comes. The only goal is to evangelize and, when necessary, use words.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I just got distracted. It somehow says that it stopped recording on your end.
Oh.
It just
Am I
happened.
supposed to record?
No, you shouldn't have had to do anything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We'll see. That was new. That was new because I could see everything. Okay, I think we'll be fine. We'll see what happens. But either way, I love that we dove into our spirituality because it's huge. It's crucial.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that to be talking with another man of God. Let me ask you, just how can people find you in social media, your website? How can people find you?
Well, if they want to know about the book that I just released, they can go on Amazon. They can search for Transforming Payments into Prosperity. If they want to come to my site, it's prosperity.smartestwealth.com. Or if they want to just know more about me in general, tony.smartestwealth.com.
Perfect.
And, basically the thing that people have to understand more than anything is that you are a millionaire in the making right now. The reason you don't feel like that is because that identity's been stolen by the budgeting lens.
And we're going to break away from that.
To get a bigger perspective.
Yeah.
You need to have a paradigm shift. And that's what we've been doing. And we've heard it over and over again over the years. Why don't they teach this in school? How come I never heard about this before? Some people even say, is this even legal?
Yeah.
But it's just because they don't, the magician always distracts you with one hand while the other hand performs the trick. In the payment matrix, that distraction is budgeting, easily affordable payments, and everything else, while the interest is coming out of your pockets like crazy, and you don't even know it.
No, I appreciate that, Tony. And I'm definitely going to be diving into your book. This is a big deal. I think that it's great. And I really do appreciate your time. I'm going to be putting all this into social media. And I look forward to talking to you more, Tony.
My pleasure, Jaime. It was great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Let me stop this.